ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent Jesus, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, This illness is not unto death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified by means of it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, Jesus said to his disciples, Let's go into Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were but now seeking to stone you, and you are going there again. And Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? And if one walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone who walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him. Thus he spoke, and then he said to them, Our friend Lazarus is fallen asleep, but I go to wake him out of sleep. And the disciples said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover. Now Jesus had spoken of this death, but they thought that he meant taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, Let us also go, that we may die with him. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him while Mary sat in the house. And Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. And Jesus said to her, Your brother will rise again. And Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me shall not die, yet shall he live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And she said to him, Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, he who is coming into the world. And when she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying quietly, The teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. And when the Jews who were with her in the house consoling her saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Then Mary, when she had come where Jesus was and saw him, fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And he said, Where have you laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, See how he loved him. But some of them said, Could not he open the eyes of the blind, have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. And Jesus said, Take away the stone. And Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead for 4 days. And Jesus said to her, Did I not tell you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. I knew that thou hearest me always. But I have said this on the account of the people standing by, that they may believe that thou didst send me. And when he had said this, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with bandages, and his face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, Unbind him and let him go. Many of the Jews therefore had come with Mary, and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him.
Good morning. Well, happy and blessed Lazarus Saturday. I want you all to think, did you all ever read The Hungry Caterpillar when you were little? All right, remember the hungry caterpillar? Remember it crawls along, and then what does it do? Before it turns, it does something. It eats, it drinks, it turns into a chrysalis. That's a big word. All right, and then it wraps itself up, right? It wraps itself up, and then it hangs on a tree, and it looks like it's asleep. What about a bear? Have you ever heard of hibernation? Hibernation, sometimes bears and other animals, they eat lots of food, and then they go into a cave, or they go into some quiet place where they're all snugly, and they go hibernate for a while. But the chrysalis becomes a butterfly, and the bear wakes back up. But at the time of Christ, when people died, they didn't rise from the dead. They got swallowed up by something known as Hades. Can you say Hades? Not the country Hades, but Hades. It was known as the place of the dead. You remember that commercial, Get in My Belly? That's all he wanted to do was eat people. Could you imagine just living your life so you could be eaten by death? And that's what he did. Hades swallowed everybody up. But it wasn't like hibernating. Or it wasn't like getting inside of a cocoon. Because if you get inside of a cocoon, you're going to come out as a butterfly. Or if you're a hungry bear and you eat and you go hibernate, you're going to wake back up and walk around the same land that you walked on. But when people died before Jesus, that was it. They got swallowed up by death to never be seen again. And everyone, think of your stomach. Who can think of the last thing they ate? What was the last thing you ate? Tomato? Oatmeal. Okay. Imagine you're in the stomach and all of a sudden oatmeal comes on you. All right. It's gross. But think about it. If more dead people just keep coming in and keep coming in, and you're all trapped inside this stomach of death, it'd be pretty lousy, right? It would be awful. Well, that's what happened to Lazarus. And that's what happened to everybody. Before Jesus came into the world, everybody, no matter how good or how bad you were, you got swallowed up by the stomach of death. So think of all the people throughout the Bible. Abraham, Sarah, Moses, Noah. All the people got swallowed up into the stomach of death. And now, Lazarus, Jesus' friend. Do you all have good friends? Yeah, do you think of someone that you would be really sad if they left? That's how Jesus was with Lazarus. He loved everybody. But he really, as a friend, knew and cared about Lazarus. And his disciples even told him, hey, your friend Lazarus is sick. And Jesus says, I know. I know that he's sick. And he says something really weird. He says, I'm glad we weren't there. He says, I'm glad we weren't there to heal him. That's a strange thing to say. But Christ knows that he has the power over death. And that's why they allow him to die. He had been dead 4 days. You know, now when someone dies, many times we refrigerate their body, or sometimes we do other things like embalming so that the body doesn't smell. And we can do a funeral in the church like 10 days after someone passes away, and the body still looks very nice. But in those days, they had no ice, no refrigeration. So if you were going to bury someone, you had to do it within hours of when they died, because the body was going to start decaying. Lazarus had been dead how many days? 1 day of stink, 2 days of stink, 3 days of stink, and 4 days it's going to get really, really stinky in there. And they didn't just wrap him up. They put him inside of a tomb. And when Jesus gets there, what does he say? Show me where you've laid Lazarus. And what's funny is Christ already knows. He's God. He knows exactly where Lazarus is. The body is in one place inside that tomb, but where's Lazarus' soul? It got swallowed up into the stomach of Hades, into the stomach of death. So, imagine, what's the stinkiest thing you own? Someone raise your hand. Your socks. Okay. Imagine you ran all day in your socks, and then your shoes were bothering you, so you took them off, and it started raining, and so you played in the rain in your socks, and you kept them on, and then you knew they were nice new socks that your mom and dad got you, and you knew if you showed it to mom and dad, they'd be upset, so you said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to hide them. I'm going to get a Ziploc bag and hide them where mom and dad won't find them. And then you forget about them. And your room starts to smell after 1 day. Imagine how bad it's going to smell after 4 days. And the bag is still closed. What if you open that bag? All right? So that's just a smelly socks that you have. But imagine a human being who was decaying for 4 days. And Christ comes and he says, show me where you've laid him. And what do the people say? It's going to stink. It's going to smell bad. He's been dead 4 days. Why do you want to go there? And Christ doesn't wait. He says, show me where you've laid him. And when they take him to where they've laid him to the tomb, he says, open the door of the tomb. And once again they say, but Jesus is going to smell. He says, open the door of the tomb. Then he jumps in and pulls Lazarus out, right? No. What does he do? With his voice. That's how powerful your God is. Your God doesn't even have to use his muscles. He's got them. But he doesn't even have to use them. He just uses his voice and says, Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus was glad. Lazarus said, I'm no longer in the stomach of death. But you didn't hear it in the gospel. But who do you think began getting really scared? The devil. The devil and death. Because death had this kingdom and the devil was in charge of. And the devil was the ruler of death's domain. He was the king of death. And all of a sudden, someone with their voice, just their voice alone, called forth a dead man from the tomb. The scary news is that if he did that with his voice, what would he do if he actually came down? And that's why Hades begins trembling. And Hades says, take him back, take Lazarus back. At least I get to keep all the rest. But we know And this is what we sing today and tomorrow, that this is just the beginning of the good news. This is what we call the prefigurement. Just a little taste of what's going to happen when Christ goes down. Because when Christ goes down with his body, there will not be one person left in the stomach of death. Today, we celebrate Christ with his voice as God and King of all, calling one person back from the dead. But a week from now, in the wee hours of the night, we're going to celebrate not just God's voice going down to Hades, but Christ himself, the Son of God, in his body going down and freeing not just one, not two, not three, but the whole of creation, so that Hades no longer exists. Do we still die? Yeah, Father James and Father George and Father Simeon, we still have funerals at our churches. But we don't just die unto death. We die to be raised from the dead. And it's a glorious thing. And that's why we as Christians, we don't say we're happy when people die, but we know it's not the end. Because Christ has saved us from the jaws of death. So this is going to be a fantastic day. The very first and foremost thing we have to do is celebrate the liturgy and open our mouths to receive that good God who loves humanity so much, who desires all of us to be his children. And we open our mouths and allow him to come inside of our lives. And then we get to break bread together and then spend a glorious day outside. But the reason we do this is because we have a good God. Sometimes we're bad friends. Sometimes we're really lousy friends. But our God chooses to be the friend of humanity and will not let Lazarus or any of us stay in the stomach of death. But he desires to raise us up to his kingdom. To that good God who calls Lazarus and all of us to life, be glory forever and ever. Amen.